Today, we have Michael Fitzgerald with Gideon Properties. Mike flew in from Maryland to share how he went from a one-bedroom apartment to doing his $1 million farm deal with no money out of pocket to owning hundreds of doors and running the Dream Fund. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm Steve Trang, founder of the OfferFast Homes app, the only MLS for off-market wholesale properties, and I'm on a mission to create 100 millionaires. One question I get a lot is how do I become one of the 100 millionaires, and please allow me to answer it here. The information on this podcast alone is enough to help you become a millionaire in the next 5 to 7 years. Take consistent action and you will become one. When you hear a nugget, type into the comment section. After the show, identify your single biggest takeaway and focus on just that for the next 7 days. If you get value today, please tag a friend below or share this episode right now. That way we can all grow together. And this is a live show, so please ask your questions for Mike to answer. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, so first question is what got you into real estate?
So I was driving down old Route 40 in Maryland, and I called a rent-to-own ad in the newspaper. I had about $10,000 saved up. And the guy on the other line, his name was Dave, and he said I sounded like I'd make a much better real estate investor than renting to own his house, and told me about the real estate associations in D.C. and Baltimore, and said I could buy property, no money down. So, of course, I was voted most gullible my senior year of high school, so of course I believed I could buy property, no money down, and it worked.
Yeah.
So I started going to real estate associations. About 2 months in, I had my first deal, 13706 Mercersburg Road, Clear Spring, Maryland. I bought it with a division of proceeds, no money out of pocket, where I could make X and the homeowner could make everything over X. So we agreed to a price, and I was allowed to make profit on everything over that price. Left my job 2 weeks before the property settled and never looked back.
That was your first deal. How long? So you call the rent-to-own sign. What prompted you to call the rent-to-own sign?
So the rent-to-own wasn't my first deal, but on the rent-to-own, I knew I wanted to create wealth, and I just didn't know how.
But was there a
So
book?
I said if I own a, well, I figured if I owned a piece of real estate, I'd create wealth. So I had to own something. I was 20 years old in an apartment. I had to own something. So I saw this rent-to-own sign. I called the guy, and he said, "Look, I don't think my rent-to-own's the right type of deal for you, but I think you sound like you'd make a much better investor than renting to own my house." I started going to Baltimore Real Estate Investors Association, the Washington, D.C. area associations, Traction, REIA, so on.
But was there a book or something that you read that compelled you, like rent to own, or it was just real estate? I just know real estate will make me wealthy.
I wanted to make money. So right before that, how I saved up the $10,000 is I negotiated a deal over the internet with a company in China for 3,000 little mini motorcycles. Then said that I wanted a sample order at the same price of 30. Used all my $500 credit cards, everything. Sold them in a month by word of mouth. I used to roll them through the local mall with my name on a piece of paper. I got kicked out of there 3 or 4 times, but I sold them in a month. Had between 10 to 15,000. Called a rent-to-own ad. Thought I would be a big importer. Found real estate and never looked back. Real estate has been really good to me.
So what? So you went to the REIAs. And you bought that property. How long from your very first REIA to actually doing a deal?
About 2 months.
Okay, so not terribly long.
No, but I took a lot of action. First I bought a couple $100 in Bandit signs. Then I called everybody on Craigslist, and I just took a lot of action. And I probably had the same thoughts everybody else has. Is this going to work? Should I keep pursuing it? But I stuck with it. I took massive amounts of action, and it worked.
Got it. Okay, so all of this, you said that you're 20 years old, so it doesn't sound like you were in college.
No.
Okay, so what were you doing? I know you did the toys with China. What were you doing for money before then?
I went in the military a week after I graduated high school. I went to senior week. I left 2 days later. I mean, what a surprise! And I was in the 18th Airborne Corps down at Fort Bragg. Jumping out of planes with 1st of the 321st Heavy Artillery. I only had a 3-year enlistment, and then I was 20 years old still when my enlistment ended. Mm-hmm. And within a week or two, I talked my way into a job I was supposed to have a 2-year degree for. Left the job 4 or 5 months later, still 20 at the time, and jumped into real estate.
All right, so then you do your first deal, all from your one-bedroom apartment.
All from my one-bedroom apartment. I actually did 15 of my first 17 houses, and about 13 of them no money down creatively from a one-bedroom apartment.
Yeah. So, because there's 2 things I want to emphasize here, because, we're doing our free wholesaling course. We get a lot of questions, and 2 of the questions that seem to come up a lot is, how do I get started, and how much money do I need? And
You don't need any money. Any money. You know, the $1 million deal you were talking about, when I got that, I had like $24,000 in the bank. A farmer calls me up, says, "Hey, I want $1 million for my farm." I'm like, "Sure, I can help you."
Yeah.
Then I ended up working it out for around $600, where I could subdivide the property, pay so much a month for his living expenses, then sell any or all of the subdivision towards my purchase price. Literally did the whole deal, no money down. At some point,
He financed the whole thing.
He financed the whole thing, and at the end of the day, I created over $1 million in equity. Now, with that being said, I thought it would take me 3 months. It took about 15. The county denied me for no apparent reason other than I had a baby face and looked 10 years old, because we went to the zoning appeals board. I'll never forget it. The surveyor, Fred at the time, I had a surveyor and an attorney. When I started the deal, I had 20-some thousand in the bank. By the time I got done the deal, I had over 50,000 in it. It was money I made along the way on other real estate deals, paying the guy's living expenses, paying for the surveyor. The surveyor stands in front of a zoning commission. He explains 4 of the exact situation, and at the end of each one, he's like, "So I took an aspirin that day at work. So why, when I take the same aspirin for Mr. Fitzgerald's situation, is he not allowed the subdivision?" And I got it unanimously. Netted $1.1 million in equity from a 1-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
And then I learned one of the biggest lessons in my life, Steve,
Which is?
because I didn't sell it. I held on to it, and I just thought the equity would keep going up. And then the recession happened, you know, right before 07, and you know, luckily I had the farm. I ended up selling it for much less, and moving to the farmhouse, and that's how I had multiple rehabs going on at the time. My original investor told me, "Mike, you know, you got to cut everything out like a cancer." I leveraged the farm. Moved into it, paid all my investors off, paid all my losses, and moved forward. I started out after a recession about negative 200,000 equity, never filed bankruptcy, never modified anything. In fact, the farmhouse, multiple times I tried to get a refinance, and they kept saying, no, you got to miss a payment and do a loan modification. So I drove down to BB&T a couple of years in, because I was paying an arm, 6%, parked out front, rented a sports car, walked in and asked for the top 3 people of BB&T by name. And they actually got their offices on the phone. They thought I was supposed to be there. I brought a briefcase and everything. So security escorted me out. The next day they called me up and they said, you know, what was that about? I said, "I just want to refinance my mortgage. I called the loan modification. They want me to miss a payment." They sent me a refinance letter the very same day, refinanced me at 3.75%. I got it the next day in the mail.
That's awesome.
And the funny thing is, years later, I got a BB&T loan on a building called the Professional Arts Building. So I told the local market president about it. So he talked to some people at BB&T corporate, the people I said I contacted. They remembered it, and they thought it was very funny.
I think the key here, because a lot of people, you know, they try to go through the front door. And there's nothing wrong with trying to go through the front door, right? Like, that's the way you're supposed to go. But the front door doesn't always work. And if the front door doesn't work, you got to go through other means and measures. And that's what you did. So I love that. So you actually rented a sports car?
Yes.
Did you just buy that suit that day?
Yes, and I double parked out front. But I got my refinance. You know, and years later, the farm's actually an Airbnb now. I ended up living there 10 years. I went from never living in a farmhouse, never living in the country. I moved in there, Steve. There was 4 chickens in the barn. And I heard about the livestock auction like 15 miles away. So I started going to these livestock auctions. You know, I'm a young kid. I'm wearing a tie. I'm around these Mennonites and these Amish folks. I mean, and literally every animal that went through it at a deal I ended up buying. So to make a long story short, I had over 150 animals. Now it's an Airbnb of about 70 animals. Peacocks, guineas, turkeys, goats. If you want, you can stay there for free. We rent it for about $300 a night. And it's attached to a bunch of state parks. So there's hundreds of acres behind it. And I actually had all 6 Washington County Boys and Girls Clubs up there multiple different years, and I ended up living there about 10 years until I moved in 2015.
Did you make money like flipping the livestock too?
No. It was just it was a hobby.
Got it.
I decided I'm doing enough real estate. I'll work on my office and stuff. But the cool thing is we get a lot of families there from all over the country. It stays pretty booked. You know, it's kind of like a destination Airbnb now. And
interesting.
It's bringing in about $6,000 a month. So I'm happy with it.
it.
No, but I should
I
should leave
story
that
behind it.
So
For sure.
doing real well.
Okay, so first deal. Remind me again how you got the first deal.
So I put Bandit signs out.
So
And
first deal was a
it
Bandit
actually
sign.
came off a Bandit sign.
Awesome.
And
So you did your first deal was Bandit sign. the fourth one, was that a Bandit sign too, that farm?
It was a mixture of direct mail and Bandit signs. So
Got it.
The farm was actually direct mail.
Okay. And so for everyone listening, like how long ago was this?
This was in 2005. I first got that deal, and I closed on it in 2006, right end of 2005, 2006. It was maybe end of 2004, beginning of 2005. I got the deal, and then 2006 I closed out the deal. But you got to imagine, you're in a one-bedroom apartment. You've done when I first got that deal, I had done 3 real estate deals. I had around 30 grand in the bank. You know, I was rolling. Some people, you get a call from a farmer wants $1 million for his farm. Some people are going to say, hey, I'm not ready for that deal. You know, you never know until you look at it. And it ended up being one of the best deals of my lifetime. And it definitely allowed me to not miss a beat through a recession and pay all my debts and move forward. And and the recession was great to a lot of real estate investors that could take advantage of it.
So we're like 15 minutes into this, right? And I've heard two instances where being super resourceful paid off big time. So one of the things that I've mentioned before, talking about like what you need to be successful, one of them is resourcefulness, and we look for that when we hire. So it seems like you got that in spades. How would you teach someone or show someone how to become resourceful?
Don't let fear block your way. Don't let distance block your way. Think about what you're doing. Make sure you're not doing any one deal that would take your business under. In the farm deal, I knew I was paying for it along the way. And I was ultimately going to figure out a way to do it. But you want to look at everything. You don't want to do something that doesn't make sense. You don't want to get distracted. You don't want to get 20 things going on to where you can't do anything. But when you're just starting out and you get a deal, if someone calls you up and they want $500,000 for a building, that building could be worth $700,000. You might be able to negotiate it for $400,000 and make a $100,000 wholesale fee. Always move forward and don't be scared to actually do. So many people, when they start out real estate, Steve, they think about what they're going to do, but they don't actually do it. Then when the leads actually come in, they don't. They hold back on calling. They don't. Yeah. If you take action and you take massive action, it's going to work.
Right. So you did the farm thing, and you said along the way you were doing additional deals. So what other kind of deals were you doing? So
my second deal was a subject to the existing mortgage. That's where I actually bought the property, closed on the property with a title company, Premier Settlements and Title, I believe it was at the time, and the mortgage stayed in the homeowner's name, but the deed moved in my name, and I got title insurance on everything excluding the existing mortgage. And when I went to do the deal, you got to remember, I looked 10 years old, 11 years old. I had a baby face, so I used to go in and I used to go with my tie, be all dressed up, and I used to always say, let me get back to my senior advisors. I'd always say, let me get back to someone else, because they thought I was in charge. They wouldn't take me serious.
Right.
But what that did is they always, a lot of homeowners would tell me, hey, here's what I really need for the property. Can you go ask them for this? So, and I was asking a lot of people at the REIA. My first division of proceeds contract I got from someone at the local REIA. My first subject to contract, it was a 40-page, a friend of mine now, Lou Brown contract I got from someone at the REIA. Yeah. And that's how it happened along the way. Now my third deal was an owner financing deal. My fourth deal was a farm. My fifth deal was a subject to the existing mortgage.
There's no trend here. You're just doing all sorts of different deals.
Well, correct. So, first I did all creative deals, because I didn't have, how was I going to buy properties without money?
There you go.
So good sense. Creative deals, division of proceeds, subject to the existing mortgage, owner financing. Then about 2 years in, I started raising money, and that's where things got really good, because and it was 2005, I guess about a year and a half in, a fellow by the name of Richard Greenwald came in my one-bedroom apartment. And Richard had built a business to 400 employees, just one of the businesses he built, and they were the biggest in the country for Christmas music. They invented the Christmas music box sets. Really nice guys. And he came in my apartment, took my shoe boxes full of receipts, said, "Mike, you need a bookkeeper." Then he said, "Mike, you need an office." Then he said, "Mike, you need a girl Friday. You need somebody at the office." And at first, I didn't know why was I spending all this money. But the truth of the matter is, him coming into my life is really what allowed me to really grow as I've grown along the way.
So this is a guy, massive success, 400 employees, walks into your apartment and is like, "All right. You gotta fix this, fix this, fix this."
Correct. So he was in his late 70s at the time.
What was he doing? Mentoring,
So he was a member of a local group called SCORE. I just went to him and said, "Hey,
SCORE. That's awesome.
I'm looking to raise some money," and he wanted to know more about what I did, and so he came in and helped me with it. The funny thing is, they're the biggest in the country for Christmas music, 3 Jewish guys. They sold their company in 1989 for $40 million. And now we're still friends to this day. He works out 3 times a week, does elliptical for half hour, super great guy. But the first 4 years of my business, he was really involved in advising me. When the recession happened, he said, "Mike, things are going to keep dropping. Cut everything out like a cancer.
He's the guy.
Pay all your investors. Don't modify anything. Don't short sale anything. Work on your reputation all the way through." And I've got a flawless reputation on the lending side. And I've done so much real estate over the years that I have a good understanding of real estate deals, and that's why I like the fund I have so much with my partner Mike Zlotnick, because I get to look at deals all day, and that's fun to me.
Well, I think one thing, just we kind of touched on it really quickly, but I want to emphasize for everybody, you went to SCORE, and so for some people that can't afford to get a mentor, right, can't afford to join a mastermind, this or that, there's a lot of free mentorship, and the guys that are involved in SCORE are older folks who've had successful businesses that want to help young people get started. Well,
they're really awesome. And actually, all my new managers now, I learned this. I got this advice from a guy by the name of Guy Stern. I asked him how he became so successful. He said from a young age he always worked for billionaires, and he gave me the advice to give all my managers a business plan and have them fill out the business plan for what they're doing. So I use a SCORE business plan for that to this day.
You do? Wow, that's impressive. And that's really long. So I'm surprised that they were able to complete that. I've tried it. I did the SCORE business plan. I did it 1 year. And I could never do it again because it's so freaking long. Okay, so how did we... So you were doing these deals, then the recession occurs. Was that before or after you started looking for money?
So that was after, and I'd already borrowed money. So at the time of the recession, I had 7 or 8 renovations going on, and everything went down. I took over $500,000 in losses, and I leveraged the equity in the farm to pay that, and didn't miss a beat. I didn't negotiate any interest, and I was paying 12 to 15% interest at the time. But
so really, not only were the investors kept whole, you were paying them interest as well.
Yeah, I paid their full interest, took all the losses. After the recession, I went from being over $1 million positive to about 200,000 negative. But I worked my way. I did everything I was supposed to do. I paid all my debts. I never didn't pay a dime of interest. So it's
wow.
I'm proud of that fact.
Yeah, that's really impressive, because I know people that made it through recession and they didn't necessarily default. Everyone was repaid. But I don't know anyone that also was paying the interest as well. Right.
Yeah, I paid every single bit of interest. Luckily I had 7 or 8 going on. If that happened, a couple years down the road when I had 20 going on, it would have been a little tougher.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so you're finding money, and then the recession occurs. So what did you do during the recession?
So during the recession, I did more deals. I looked for real estate harder. I bought real estate lower. All the recession did was change the numbers I buy at. It changed nothing else.
Yeah.
And actually, a couple years, banks wouldn't work with me my first 3 to 4 years. Every time I went to a bank, they said I didn't have enough experience, or I didn't. So I remember there was a fellow, Steve Michael, in town for a long time. And he used to tell people when Mike first came in, he looked 10 years old. And I said, this kid's either going to be really rich or flat broke. I can't take a risk on him yet. And the same thing, I used to walk into all the banks, and it took, after about 4 years, I started working with the bank. The recession was still going on. It was a lengthy recession, and it was the best thing I ever did. I started picking up a lot of rental property, and in real estate, rental property is very forgiving. Anybody getting into real estate, I'd recommend wholesaling at first, building capital, then picking up rentals. The great thing about rentals is no matter what you're making today on cash flow, you're paying it down, you're increasing equity, you got a good write-off, and I've been very blessed to have the rental portfolio I have. And I'd recommend anybody getting into real estate. If you're sitting on a lot of cash, you're wholesaling a lot, turn it into rental property, buy it at a discount, refinance it. You don't have to have 20 or 30% in it a lot of times if you buy it at a discount, and grow wealth.
Yeah. So you're acquiring properties, you're buying, these are for buy and hold?
Yes.
Okay. So then what you do once things turned around? Like when did the
so I was so when during a recession, I wholesaled, I renovated and flipped homes, and I started buying rentals about 4 years in. I did the whole array. It wasn't until about 2000 and before 2013, I just did regular real estate projects. Although my fourth deal, bless you. Although my fourth deal was the actual subdivision deal. I did another subdivision deal in between, which netted about $500,000 equity. Did pretty good, and it took me like 4 years to sell. That's how those deals tend to work. But I just kept moving forward, and then in about 2013, I took on a condo project, my very first one. To this day, in a market that has some very high-end condos, that project through 4 and 5 resales, last time I checked 2 months ago, still has the highest selling square footage. It's in Frederick, Maryland, 900 square foot condos for about $500,000. So I've done I did another high-end condo project, the Pythian Castle, and then when
you say you do a project, what does that mean to do a project?
That means I buy a building, I completely gut it, and completely redo it and make it beautiful. And then
while some of us are wholesaling contracts or flipping houses, you're flipping entire projects.
Correct.
Awesome.
So right now I got one of the coolest ones of my lifetime going on. I'm actually hoping for a state catalyst label.
Yeah.
And it's looking like I'll get it.
For a what label?
A catalyst label.
What does that mean?
I'm hoping, and I think I'm going to get it, a federal, state, and city partnership on a catalyst project for a city. In 2015, somebody called me up. It was kind of like the farm deal, Steve. And they said, Mike, are you interested in buying this office building? The bank was in big trouble. The feds were about to take them over, and they had to sell $270 million in real estate, or the feds were going to take them over. So I ended up buying a building called the Grand Piano Building on a short sale. The original note was $2.2 million. I got it for approximately $700,000. Had never done a project over the condo project, which was less than 10,000 square feet, and I bought a 50,000 square foot office building. But I said to myself, if I'm buying a 50,000 square foot office building for $700,000, it has to be a good deal, right?
Has to be.
So actually, that was my first city partnership. The city contributed $150,000 to that project as long as I hit my goals. At the end of the day, I added over 100 jobs downtown, and about 5,000 feet on the street a month. Now, the big part of this is when I did that project, local developers called me up. This was before Hagerstown, the city I'm in, started really moving forward. They said, Mike, what are you thinking? It's going to take you 10 years to fill. This could bankrupt you. You've been doing so well. When I finished the building, it took me 4 months to fill. You want to know how I filled it, Steve? I went to the market next door in Frederick. If it's popping, I started knocking on business doors, asking them if they ever thought of opening a second location and taking them to Hagerstown. And I 100% filled the building. So in 2015,
wow.
I got a citation from the governor in the state of Maryland, which is a good thing, not like a citation like a ticket, in front of about 800 people at the Maryland Theater. And it was thanking me for being an entrepreneur in the state and making such a big contribution towards the gentrification in Hagerstown. And then a lot of other folks started jumping on as well. And now Hagerstown's really took off. We have thousands of students.
How would someone get into a position where the city is calling you, or some institution?
I call the city.
So you called the city. You asked them, like, hey, you got anything that you guys are taking down? You guys were closing on any properties?
No, it wasn't the city. The city, I bought it from a bank.
Oh.
Then I went to the city and said, if I do these certain things in this amount of time, will you contribute towards the project? And the city contributed $150,000 towards the project.
Got it. So it's kind of like some of the city subsidies, trying to encourage companies to move in.
Correct. And I did another one that was about $600,000 in contributions about 2 years ago, and now I'm working on the biggest one yet.
Yeah. So... okay, so you go into the city and they're working with you. So it's not necessarily the city calling like, hey, Mike, I need you to buy this property. It's the banks.
No. That was an owner calling, connecting me with the bank because the bank was looking to move the property. So this bank in a recession literally had to sell a lot of real estate. So they were calling their borrower saying, "Look, we won't go after you for the money," and this was a non-performing note. So I was able to get the property at about a $1.5 million discount from a note. Then I raised some money going into it. You got to figure I'm going to investors I normally flip houses with and banks trying to raise money for this. We put about we put about 1.2 million into the building, and I got 150,000 of that back, and it's a good building. I'm actually my office. We just moved in there a couple months ago, so it's a great.
So you guys
space.
still own it?
I still own it.
Got it. All right, and then from there, how did you go to? You said a few 400 plus doors.
So I just along the way, good deals that came up, I was buying. Actually, in the past 4 years, I've sold about 200 doors, or I'd have more. And then most of them I own myself. I have a partnership in Oklahoma where I have 105 units with two guys. That's going well. And the doors. So when banks started lending to me before they could blink, when a banker first took a chance on me, and now that banker as a commercial lender took a chance on me, said, I'm going to take a chance on you. And before he knew it, I had $2 million in loans. So then I went to another bank. I said, well, this bank's giving me $2 million in loans and rentals. They're working out good. I can still keep working with them. But would you like to give me, if you want to do anything, let me know. Right. And then before you knew it, I was working with 4 or 5 banks and had, I said when I was 25 years old, I wanted to own 200 rental units by the time I was 29. When I was 27, I owned 200 rental units.
That's awesome. That's incredible.
And I did it from nothing. My biggest achievement still is, I was able to buy my childhood home back for my parents and move them into it. So I'm happy about that.
So one of the things that people, kind of like a mental hurdle that you need, again, talking about earlier, you need money. So what was your circumstance growing up to...
So, my dad worked very, very hard. He always had 2, 3, even 4 jobs. And when we were growing up, I used to get bags of clothes on the porch from churches, presents from churches around holiday times. My dad worked really hard, but I've always been motivated to make money. So when I was 8 and 9 and 10 years old, I was shoveling sidewalks. When I was 10, I had a paper route. I got my first front page newspaper article. They dropped me off in neighborhoods, and I ended up selling almost every door that opened. So I sold over 2,000 new newspaper subscriptions in a summer. I started a paper out with 70 customers. When I was done, it had 400, and they had to split it in half. And they gave me a paper article. It was called "The Bird Boy of Sharpsburg." In the middle of an article, it said this charismatic 5'1" 7th grader says what he's going to do is sell all his baseball cards and open up a pet store within a chain of pet stores. Then I had always worked before I was 18.
So that was 10 years old that you were in a paper about opening all these pet stores.
Yeah. Then I had about 20 lawn mowing jobs. I started paying other kids to mow them. Yeah. Then I before I went in the Army, before I graduated, I played sports every season, and I went to I worked at Britches Great Outdoors, a clothing store, Timberland, Levi's Dockers, multiple restaurants. I always had a job, I always had a job or some type of business before I went in the military. Then when I got out of the military, I said, what do I do? Do I go out of college? I want to make money. Yeah. And I just kept looking for ways to make money. I read something in Forbes about importing, so I did the deal in China, and a guy said, hey, you sound like you make a better real estate investor, so I turned to real estate.
The reason why I'm asking this is because I want these people to get the limiting belief that you need to come from money or your parents need to set you up for success.
I come from no money. My parents are really hard workers. They're wonderful people. I definitely got a work ethic from my parents, but I started with nothing. My parents really struggled as I was growing up. Later on, after I was in the Army, they were my dad went full-time Army, actually full-time National Guard for the retirement. But growing up, it started out when I was 9 or 10. I wanted new clothes. I wanted some of the clothes other kids wore because I'd get picked on for moving to different towns and getting clothes given to me and wearing the same clothes that somebody else wore but they donated. So that's where it's, I've just always been motivated. But I remember from a very young age, I used to hide my birthday money until it added up. I'd always end up giving it to my parents to help them out. Same with the paper route. I contributed my whole time growing up, and
Wow.
But I'm grateful. Like I said, my dad's a hard worker, and they're good people.
So going back, I know you said that you just had deals just coming through, and just kind of. It sounds like they fell in your lap, but they ultimately didn't, right? Like when you're acquiring all these.
No, nothing really falls in your lap.
So
I
let's talk
was
about how
marketing, I was direct mailing at that time. I mean, it was really easy because all these foreclosures kept popping up, all these short sales on the MLS. So a lot of the deals at that time I got on the MLS.
So you weren't even, so you were finding that the multifamily on MLS.
Correct, but the overwhelming majority of my deals in my lifetime have been from marketing or personal referrals.
Mm-hmm.
I have an apartment complex in Hagerstown, Long Meadow Apartments, one of the best deals I've ever done, and that was a referral from an appraiser. So, I always tell people what I do, and to this day, I get 5, 10, 15 real estate referrals a month.
Wow, that's really good.
When I first started, Steve, I used to stand in line at Borders, if you remember that bookstore.
Yeah.
And I used to start talking to people in line, and just start making conversation. Then I'd say, "Hey guys, I got a question. How many of you drive by a piece of real estate that looks a little bit run down? How long does it take to write down an address?" They'd all say like 30 seconds, 1 minute. And I'd say, so hey, if you refer me 20 of them and I close on one and I give you $500, that's a couple $100 an hour. So I literally, from doing that at different stores and talking to different people, at one point in my life, I got 40 to 50 personal referrals a month.
Wow.
Just from telling everybody what I did. And I used to hand out referral fees all the time.
Were you handing out those metallic business cards then?
No. More recently, I do mass. I do a lot of marketing, a lot of direct mail, RBM, and stuff like that.
All right. So you're acquiring all these doors, and then somewhere along the line, you get involved with Zlotnick.
Well, that's way down the road.
Down the road.
I'm fortunate to be a member of two masterminds, Collective Genius, the top mastermind in the country for real estate investors. Great folks. I've been a member 6 years. The fund is more in the past 2 years. So March of this year makes 17 years in real estate. I've literally been doing real estate 44% of my life, Steve. And I started with nothing.
Yeah. So you recently, you said the last couple of years connected with Zlotnick.
And that's really what I see as a future. I want to get it to where we're very good at what we do. We got a lot of great tier 1 sponsors from the mastermind. What that means is guys that have been doing real estate a good number of years, and they're buying properties at discounts. So we got a lot of opportunity. We have third-party administration, so everything's verified. In 2019, Q1 through Q4, our first full year of inception, investors made over an 11% return with 10% distributed, and I enjoy it. So right now we're still doing marketing. We're still picking up a lot of new properties. But what I want to get it to in the next 3 or 4 years is I'd like to do one big deal myself away from the fund, because I don't borrow from the fund, like an apartment complex, an office building, and really be a fund manager. I absolutely love it. A lot of our sponsors are just amazing what they do. It's the guys that are going out there offering on 100 apartment complexes a year to buy 2 that are worth $5 million for $2.5 million. So I feel really comfortable. The downside protection is massive, and I really look at that as where I want to be in the future. I'm hoping, I'm 37 right now, just turned 37, but I'm hoping by the time I'm 40,
just a baby. You got a baby face.
I'd like to. My goal is to raise $100 million for the fund, and we have the clients to put it to work. We got third-party administration in the next 3 years. First, I'm in such a great mastermind, great folks. Both masterminds I'm in. I'm also in the top for real estate marketers. I like a lot of the guys in it, and Collective Genius is great. So through Collective Genius, I was recommended EOS, so we got EOS, and I'm working on getting the business to where I have to be there about 10 or 15 hours a week, and I just want to raise money for the fund. Whenever you're looking at real estate deals, and every single one, it's like, man, I wish I had that deal. It's a good day to lend on them, so I really enjoy that.
The other one you're talking about Matt Andrews?
Yes.
Yeah.
Matt's a great guy.
I'm in that one too. That guy, he kind of cracked the code a little bit with Clubhouse. I mean, he's just crazy in that thing. All right, yeah. So we're both in CG together. So while I was at CG, someone introduced us, Kong Lee.
Great guy. Wholesale to millions.
Wholesale to millions. So he said, Steve, you got to meet Mike. He's my mentor. You want to talk about that?
So I haven't mentored many people, but I have mentored 3 people, and all 3 people I've mentored are crushing it, just crushing it. So Kong met me. I'm friends with a fellow by the name of Robert Shemin. He wrote a book, Why Is That Idiot Rich and I'm Not? Super great guy. So he invites me different places. I went to one of his super high-end seminars, and Kong comes up to me and says, my wife says you got to coach us in real estate. I'm like, look, I don't coach people in real estate. And then he said, just give me a number. Give me a number. And after he was so persistent, after about a half day, I gave him a number. He paid me. I went out there for 3 days. He had been going to high-end seminars for around 7 or 8 months, or any seminars, trying to pick up his first deal. He picked up his first deal within a couple weeks of me going out there, had 3 deals in 2 months. And I got to give the guy credit. He's amazing. What he's done and what he's turned his business into is absolutely something special. He has an amazing wholesale business. He has an amazing business providing people info on real estate. He's an amazing guy.
Yeah.
I told him what to do. He did it, and he crushed it. And he's come a long way on his own right. And there was 2 other people too that are doing very well. I've decided with focus, coaching really isn't what I do, but I'm probably going to set up something once I'm just raising money for the fund, and my office is really managing a lot on its own, which I'm already seeing that start to happen. I'm probably going to do something where I bring maybe 1 person a month to my office just to shadow my office and me for a couple days at some kind of fee, because the value someone gets off that is massive.
Right.
But I like Kong a lot. He's a very good guy.
Great guy. And we're always texting, pushing each other. So, but yeah, I wasn't sure what to take him, because he's always like kind of joking around a little bit.
No, I was his mentor.
Yeah. All right. So, you're in Maryland. There's a lot of people in Maryland, right? Like, you're not the only fish.
No.
So how are you different than your peers?
So I'd say I'm different than my peers, because a lot of folks, they just stop marketing. Once they get some deals, they stop marketing, they do those deals, they interrupt their marketing. Or other guys, they get a hang up and they slow down. One of the biggest things I learned in real estate, Steve, is if you have a problem and you lost money on something, do more deals. If you stop doing deals, that kind of messes you up. If you keep doing more deals, pay for the problem and move on. I learned that, I guess, in after a recession in 2011, 10-ish, 11, I had a building collapse and the insurance company denied me, and it was a 13-unit apartment building. And it collapsed while we were doing work. I had no idea there was foundation issues. And I fought the insurance company. I won. I still got a fraction after paying attorneys. But over that time, I could have just stopped. And if I just stopped, I would have been hurt, and I would have had to sell stuff. But I kept wholesaling. I kept buying and fixing up, and that paid for everything and moved along. So I'd say, once you start doing real estate, don't let anything slow you down. Don't let anything hold you up. Keep moving forward, because as soon as you stop moving forward, you take a chance of moving backwards. Yeah. And you just don't want that. Real estate has been very good to me, and I credit it to the action moving forward, and being blessed to be around wonderful people. And speaking of Kong earlier, I've learned stuff from him in the last couple of years, but that's been a wonderful relationship, and he's a great guy.
Yeah, the last time we hung out, you and I, was about it was actually last month. we had the chance to see Mark Del Latore speak, and I think everyone got like a big crush on his business.
I agree.
So what does your business look like today? What does your organization look like today, and what do you want it to look like?
Okay, so what it looks like today is I've hired some high-level people. We got a rental division. We got the wholesale division, which we're growing, moving forward on. We got the rehab division, which we're kind of slowing down on. We got the accounting, and then we have 4 VAs that are taking all the calls, live calls from advertising and stuff like that. And then we have 3 maintenance people. So right now I'm trying to grow my managers. I learned a lot from Mark about letting them make mistakes, and really just try to be the best I can be for them. And I feel like what Mark did was the right way. One thing he said during the mastermind that really touched me was the fact he let his implementer go work in each part of the business. I think that's really important. So I took that out of it. And So my organization today, we have a whole chart. It's me and the COO, then the finance manager, and then over top of different divisions, the person is charged of sales. The person doing the selling isn't a VA anymore, and then the construction and the rentals. I used to have a REIA. So I started a real estate investor association with two guys. A lot of folks have spoken at my REIA actually in CG in about 2007. Then in 2017, I decided I really needed to focus if I wanted to get to being a fund manager and get to everything I wanted. So at one point we had like 300 members. But I ended up giving up the REIA and just really zeroing in on the business.
Yeah, it's tough because I wouldn't call it a REIA, but we have our meetup, which is a lot of fun.
They're always fun, aren't they?
They are, right? And you get to hang out and drink and whatever. But COVID really screwed everything up, and so I haven't had one since March of last year, and so I gotta figure out what I want to do with that.
COVID is it depends how it relates to your business. If it relates directly to your business and it doesn't take your focus away, I'd recommend keeping it. If it doesn't meet the end goals and it doesn't relate directly to your business, maybe move on. But I'll tell you, they're a lot of fun, aren't they?
They're a lot of fun. No, it always reinvigorates me. It gets me fired up. So one question I want to ask you. It seems like you're always got things going together. Things seem to be working really well. Do you have moments where you're discouraged or feeling down on yourself?
I think everybody has moments when they're discouraged. Mm-hmm. But the best thing you can do is think about the end result, and you're already on the way there.
Yeah.
Of course I have moments where I'm discouraged, but usually when I have those moments, I think about all the great things I have to be grateful for, and where I want to be. I'm a big believer in announcing what you want. I am doing this. I can do this. Kind of like the Saint Germain thing. I was a little bit discouraged as I was when I first joined CG the first couple of years. I see all these amazing guys, and I see me working 40, 50 hours a week to be amazing. I was like, I want to be one of these guys. So we're working on that, and we're getting to that point very quickly now. So I would say yes, but I always move beyond that quickly.
Got it. So tell me about the Dream Fund.
So the Dream Fund's with me and my partner Mike Zlotnick. Mike has a podcast, Big Mike Fund Podcast. It's he's been a successful fund manager for about 10 years. And we really came up together because I looked at what he was doing, and he could put a lot more money to work. We're in this mastermind. We have these guys buying real estate at fractions on the dollar, and just through it's relationship deal making. We don't take people on the street. We meet people in masterminds, and we look to be part of their deals where it's a win for them and makes sense for the fund. Our target return is 10 to 12%, and we pay investors a 5% preferred return on their money, meaning if a fund ever didn't make 10 to 12%, that 5% would be made up when it did. But so far we've done very well even through COVID. I'm happy with this year, and we feel good about our targeted returns. And then we have third-party fund administration, which means they look through everything, verify everything, which is Verivest.
Got it. So was that what you were talking about earlier, where you get first looks on lots of great deals?
Yeah, that's really enjoyable to me. I love looking at real estate deals. The deal itself, and I feel like too, when a tier one guy's doing a deal, I can add a lot of value to that. I also like the wholesaling model. So the idea is that we're gonna really, I'd like to slow down on rehabbing, do one big deal, do one big deal at a time, maybe in 3 or 4 years, keep the wholesaling model going, keep my existing portfolio rentals, and then really just work on the fund.
Got it.
So and you've had, by the way, I love your podcast. You have some really awesome guys on here.
We're very lucky to have some really good names come on here, and including yourself. So you said you're 35?
I'm 37.
37. All right. So you could stop right now.
I could.
So why don't you stop?
I'm driven, and on top of being driven, the core key people in my business I want to take care of and provide retirement for through real estate. and I'm not ready to stop. What am I going to do if I stop? I'm 37 years old. I want to really be. I really want to have the wholesale model, because historically I've done a lot of rehabs. I was doing 60, 70 plus rehabs a year for a long time, and only a chunk of wholesales. I'm trying to get it to where it's all wholesale, so it's less time consuming. And I really like, you had a guy on here a few weeks ago, Eric Brewer. He has an awesome wholesale model. So I'm really trying to get the wholesale model going super strong and just move forward. I think if I stopped, what would I do, Steve? How bored? You'd be bored.
Bored in my mind.
What would you do? I don't see any reason to stop right now. When I'm going to stop, I don't.
Yeah.
That everything moves forward very smoothly regardless. What about you? What keeps you going, Steve?
I just have to crush everybody. I don't know what else to say, right? We had the kids who were, they had an extra day off with COVID. Like the school's trying to figure out what to do. So my wife's working from home, and they're like, I was like, you guys ready to go back to school? The kids are like, no, not really. I asked my wife, you ready to go back to work? She's like, I guess. She's like, what about you? I was like, I can't wait to get back to the office. Right? It's killing me sitting at home, like not doing anything. Like I'm playing freaking solitaire, watching videos on TikTok, right? Listening to things on Clubhouse. I'm going crazy.
Yeah.
I need to be doing something.
It's because you love what you do.
Yeah.
That's very important. Anybody listening to your podcast that hasn't done their first real estate deal yet, if they start taking action, it'll happen. If you believe it's going to happen, and if you keep taking action and don't give up, you're going to get your first deal. And one thing I often think about is my first year in real estate. It was hard to get 4 deals. My next year it was hard to get 9 or 10 deals. My next year it was hard to get 20 deals. Well, now, if I push it, I can do over 100 deals a year.
Right.
So it gets easier and easier the longer you do it, and a lot of it's just experience moving forward and taking action.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what is your biggest struggle right now?
So I've got a lot of new high-level people through hiring EOS, like business implementers, and it's giving them enough time and growing them enough, and not just jumping on things myself.
Got it. And what is your superpower?
I'd say networking. I love to network, which is why I wanted to be a fund manager. Actually, COVID's messed me up on that. I've got some great friendships in the Middle East. I got great friendships in America. Some people have seen me in a room and said, Mike, I watched you tonight. Do you realize you went to all 70 tables in this room and shook everybody's hand? Obviously, I can't do that with COVID, but I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of great people networking, and a lot of folks in CG and other folks have told me that's my superpower. So
interesting. I did not know that. You did make an appearance in our last YouTube video about CG giving the toast. Guys, please ask questions, right? Like we got Mike here. I'm asking a lot of questions here, but this is open for you guys to ask questions as well.
And my Instagram, if Steve doesn't mind, is Mike, the number 2, the THE Fitz. Mike to the Fitz.
I tried tagging you on Instagram, but you have it set where you can't be
tagged.
Let
me I'll set that off, so yeah. I'll fix that so you can tag me.
Yeah. All right. So then I saw you answer this question, so I have to ask it. What book have you gifted more than any other?
Why Is That Idiot Rich and I'm Not by my good friend Robert Shemin.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What were the lessons in that book? Because that's a very interesting title.
It's a fact. If you just do it, you believe in it, you envision it, it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. If you say you're going to do it, but you don't envision it, you don't believe in it, it doesn't necessarily happen. So it's a lot of people and what they did different and what made them rich.
But why is that idiot rich?
Because they envision in it, they dream it, and they do it. Mm. If you do it and you envision it, it's always going to happen. You just can't give up the first time it doesn't happen. It would have been easy for me. I remember probably a month and 3 weeks into my real estate career, my apartment, is this going to work? But I mean, if you don't keep moving forward, it's never going to work. Or no matter what you're doing in life, if you really want to do it, say, hey, here's where I want to get. Here's who I want to be. How do I get there? How do I do it? And you'll get better every day.
It's interesting because I have my best friend, right? He's still my accountability partner. We still meet every single month.
That's awesome.
To talk about our business. And it's someone like a best friend since like 7th grade. So we still meet every month. And one of the things that fires us up was like, that guy, there's nothing more special about that guy than me. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to pass him. And that's just something that, and we're both competitive, right? And so we're always looking and measuring. It's like, okay, well, we should definitely pass that guy. So now that guy is the next target. And once we pass that guy, okay, that guy is the next target. And, you know, we were saying earlier, what is your why? I think just for me, it's just that competition.
So I'm definitely ultra competitive. For me, it was like really helping out my family, and I've been able to do that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's my son. I'm a single dad, so I definitely want to create a super bright future for him, and I want to take care of people. You know, at the end of the day, when I'm done real estate, I love doing charity work. You know, you brought up Matt Andrews, and with the Family Mastermind. You know, he loves charity, you know, and I love doing that kind of work. And then the second thing I really like, and this is going to surprise you, is I like history. I like old things. So, you know, I'd like to dig up a few sites in the Middle East, and
you like to dig up sites.
Yeah, I really like burial. I really like ancient history.
Interesting.
And I really like. I really wouldn't mind sponsoring some of the excavation of that. And it's just really interesting to me, especially ancient texts and everything else. So
that's fascinating.
You know, at the end of the day, I want to have enough to where I can do that, and just off the interest and off the rent money. Yeah. And I can also do the things I want to do for my family. And I love charity, especially children's charities. You know, children are just their future, and a child doesn't have a choice. You know, when I was growing up, you know, you don't have a choice in how you grow up. You have a choice in what you do when you grow up. And I like being able to help youth. Yeah.
Oh, that's powerful. And I think what's important here is like we all start with money in our family. Like that's where we all start. But that's not where we all end, right? Because that's where you start. You can stop very early. You can rest on your laurels very quickly, right? Matter of 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's not what's going to keep you going. So what's got to keep you going, you have the bigger why. So you kind of talked about taking care of people, charities, your excavations. So Toby has a question.
Sure.
Do you find multifamily to be more attractive than single family?
You know, that's a good question. I like them both. They're both attractive to me. Kind of like Bitcoin and Elon Musk. You know, I like single families, because you generally get longer tenants, and the residents are there a long time, and it's really consistent. I like multifamilies, which are also consistent because you have more people in one place, and usually they're higher income earners. You know, I'd say if you're just starting out and you haven't bought your first rental yet, stay at a single family or a 2 units. You know, don't overwhelm yourself. Learn the ins and outs, and you know, really learn what you're doing. But I like them both equally, to answer that.
As your company grew and your deal count went up, other than the experience, what allowed you to continue growing?
Taking action, moving forward, doing different types of deals. You know, at the end of the day, I'm a pretty diverse guy. I've done land deals. I've done office building deals. I've done condos. I've built new homes. I decided that wasn't for me, but at one point, I think in 2013, I built 12 or 13 new homes. And I just kept moving forward and finding what I like. You know, today I think it's I have a large rental portfolio. I think it's wholesaling and buying a hold asset here or there, and running the fund is where I'm at today. But along the way, it was looking at everything that came before me and saying, at the end of the day, how long is this going to take me? What's the return? And moving forward, you don't want to limit yourself to what comes in front of you. You want to limit yourself to what makes the most sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. All right, so we got no more questions. So I'm gonna
come on, let me ask me a question. Let me help you.
Yeah, guys, please fire away. Right? I mean, Mike flew in from Maryland, and the guy's obviously a wealth of knowledge. Like, you talked about your superpower being networking. I would say your superpower, I barely know you, but from what I've seen, is just not taking no for an answer.
And I don't take no, but I have congressional recognition, Senate recognition. I have a credibility website. I can send everybody on this, but. Yeah. I've been able to make friendships in the Middle East. I've been able to make friendships with, different political figures. I've been able to make friendships. Santana Moss is a good friend of mine, a football player. I have some really good UFC fighter friends and MMA Gold teams. So I've whenever you're out, meet people, talk to people, find out what they do, and there's a lot of great people in this world, and you never know it until how I met MMA Gold Team. I was in an airport security line, and I just started talking to him, and I gave him my business card, and it was a UFC fighter, Aspen Ladd, head of MMA Gold Team, Jim West Gold. From that, they actually took me behind the scenes at the UFC. I got to sit in front of a fight with Aspen and all the top fighters, and I've just created a good friendship. So, the world really is a great place with a lot of great people, and until you get out there, you talk to people, and you keep your mind open, you don't know what you're truly capable of.
Absolutely. Gregory Ballard wants to know, how difficult was it to start a fund?
So that really, I have a great partner with a lot of experience. So we actually went through an attorney. They did a lot of the work. It's a Reg D fund with SEC, and I'd say if you use an attorney, it's not that hard. I would not recommend starting a fund on your own.
Oh, absolutely not.
If you're just doing a fund to buy and sell real estate, I'd probably look at borrowing the money on a mortgage. But if you really want to start a fund, I'd hire a qualified attorney and have them do the PPM, the private placement memorandum, and all the paperwork.
Yeah.
You definitely want to cross your T's and dot your I's with that.
Yes, you do. No, you don't want to mess around with SEC. How would somebody go about finding a qualified attorney to do that?
Google. Attorney, set up a fund.
I was just, maybe there was another resource.
No, you got to keep it simple. Too many people complicate everything. Too many people go out there and they want to start real estate, and they're like, well, if I find a deal, how am I going to buy the deal? If I have a way to buy the deal, what if something goes wrong when I do the deal? Well, if something goes wrong when I do the deal, but I get through the deal, what if I don't sell the deal? You just got to move forward. Don't think so much about what you want to do. Lay it out in executional action items. Do those action items and move forward.
Yeah, definitely. So let's say I took you, right, plopped you out, dropped you. Well, I mean, you're in Phoenix now, so you don't have any deals. You don't have any deals right now in Phoenix.
I don't, but
right.
I could.
Okay, so let's say we confiscate your cell phone, give you a burner phone. How are you doing deals right now?
If I just had a burner phone?
If you had no contacts, right? We had no relationships. How's Mike going to be doing?
I would start walking around looking for houses that were a little bit run down and start knocking on doors. I go to the courthouse, or I go to the courthouse online. I'd figure out, who may need help. It's behind on payments, the divorces, and I'd start making phone calls. I'd get it done. I mean, if you want to give me a burner phone today, Steve, you really want to test me, I'll get 50 calls and maybe a deal tomorrow.
Absolutely. I love it. Very cool. All right.
So the point is, you don't need money to invest in real estate. You need some time, and you need to do it. If you look at my first deals, I didn't need money to do my first deals the way I did them. There's always someone out there that, whether it's family, whether it's a friend, whether it's somebody you just go up to. To me, it was just, I just started going up to people saying, I made a little credibility packet that had, hey, here's who my attorney was, here's who my CPA was. Asked some real estate guys at the Real Estate Association if I could put them on there as my advisors. And just started going up to people saying, hey, I'm looking to raise money to buy and sell real estate. I can give you 12% on your money, or 15% at the time. And now I still pay 10% to a lot of the private guys, but it's been a good run.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I think that there's something that. So I announced a free wholesaling course, right? So over the New Year, it's like, hey guys, for 2021, I'm going to create a free wholesaling course. It's better than any other wholesaling course you've ever seen out there. It's going to be free.
Everybody should sign up for it. I'll sign up for it. I'll probably. If you learn one thing you didn't know before, it's an advancement.
Absolutely. So I as part of that, I asked everyone to submit a question, and more than half of the questions we got was, how do I get started? And I counter that with, you guys actually already know what to do because you guys have been watching this show. So it's not, what do you need to get started? It's just freaking start. Anything you want to add to that?
You just start doing it. When I went out, you brought up Kong earlier to visit him. First thing we did was start driving around looking for properties and pulling lists. Just do it. If you don't have money to do direct mail, call the people direct. and have a friend call them direct. But just call the people, find your first real estate deal, and move forward. Real estate, you know, I've heard a lot of times that over 90% of millionaires and wealthy people had some form of the first part of their wealth created through real estate. Real estate's an amazing vehicle. It's an amazing vehicle to live your dream life, do the things you want to do, and create other opportunities. I encourage anybody listening to this podcast, my assumption is you want to do real estate. So go to your local real estate association, ask questions, and try to get your first deal. If it's no money down, a division of proceeds, the subject to contract, read the contract twice before you go in, and act like you've done it 100 times.
So we got a question here from Ale. Is you told us about your best deal so far. What's your worst experience or deal?
That's a good question. Worst experience or deal. Okay. I'm not, so worst deal, I have I'm trying to think, because, you know, in real estate I've had a few learning lessons. They're kind of like college degrees.
Yeah.
I would say the worst deals, I'm gonna blanket this, okay? But the worst deals, which I've always paid all my interest on, they come from letting it sit too long. In real estate, if you're passive, if anything, if you give something to someone else to control and you're not watching it and you're not working through it, that can create a loss. So my worst deal, I myself, not my investors, had to pay a few $100,000 for the deal. But at the end of the day, I look at it as it's a beautiful property and it's a good piece of credibility. So
yeah.
I would say that in the beginning, I didn't have, you know, when you're just buying and selling and wholesaling just houses, if you're buying right, you're not going to come across a lot of losses. If you do, the next deal is going to make up for it. Once you get into the bigger deals, you got to be a lot more cautious.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned just a moment ago was that you want to do more wholesaling. I was on a Clubhouse with Matt Andrews, and he had finagled Grant Cardone to be on that. Mm-hmm. And Grant Cardone said that you guys are idiots if you guys are going to keep wholesaling. So, you know, when you get big enough, you just keep everything. You don't wholesale anymore. Any thoughts on that?
You know, I don't know Grant Cardone personally, but I have respect for what he does. Mm-hmm. You know, obviously he's an amazing guy. I think wholesaling is a good vehicle to keep what you want. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily believe in keeping everything. You should keep what you want. And right now, you know, what I want is the nicer apartment buildings, the nicer houses, and the nicer complexes.
Yeah.
You know, if you keep everything, then I guess you still make just as much money in equity growth and paying it down for sure. But I disagree with Grant Cardone's advice there. I would say wholesaling is a very good vehicle to keep and own what you want and keep the right properties.
So if I had a Class A apartment and I wanted to send it to Mike, how would I go about doing that?
Oh, call me right over. Mike to the Fitz on Instagram, or send me a personal email. Do you have the numbers off the top of your head? How many doors? What's it bringing in?
I don't. I'm just curious because you might be looking for more deals.
Yeah, I definitely. You know, right now the apartment complexes I'm after are more like the B and A class.
Yeah.
Plus, I sell deals. You know, I have some turnkey apartments we manage. And I still raise money to buy and sell real estate. I pay 10% of the money, and I have a fund. So I've with the fund, of course, no investments guaranteed. Invest at your own risk. We do have third-party administrators, and we have a good record. With my real estate, I've paid every single loan as agreed. I've done everything I'm supposed to do, and I've done, I'd estimate definitely north of 1,500 transactions.
Yeah.
So I love my real estate business. You know, I loved rehabbing, but if you're rehabbing 60, 70 homes a year, you don't necessarily have the time to do other things, but some people want to rehab forever. It's what you want to do, what makes you happy.
It's your passion. So Jason Toledo wants to know, how do you keep your edge in this business as far as health and mentality?
I go to my masterminds.
Yeah.
So as far as health and mentality, you know, I've been focusing on getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock every single morning. Reading, meditating a little bit before I go out there for the day. And And during weeks I have my son, I try to cut it off at around 5 or 5:30. You know, it's easy in this business just to keep it going.
There's no end.
But you got to take time for
Yeah.
family, and you got to look, if there's no end, you got to look at who can do this for me. I remember when I first started getting other people to do stuff for me back when I had my office manager. It's amazing what you can do with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say the trick is for any other people you're hiring, whether it be a virtual assistant and Robert Nickel, a good friend of mine, has a good program. They're about $1,700 a month with Rocket Station, or it's an employee. You want to say, hey, what I'm giving this person, is that making me 2 to 5 times what that person is costing me? If it is, they're a good hire, and if it gives you free time, it gives you quality of life. You don't have to wait till you're 5 years in real estate to hire an employee. You know, if you're starting out and you did your first couple deals and you have, 30, 40, even 20,000 in the bank, maybe hire a virtual assistant. You'll be surprised what you can do when you have other people helping you and you create a team.
It's amazing what you can do. Larry wants to know, how is COVID affecting how you do your business, besides not being able to shake hands anymore?
Yeah, so COVID's affected a lot because I had made some very good friendships around the country and around the world, and those have really I haven't been able to move those forward the way I'd like to. So I would say it's affected my ability, of course, to shake hands and things like that, but also it's affected everything. In the office we have to social distance. A lot of times, even wear masks if somebody even thinks they're sick. So it affects how we meet with sellers. It affects it absolutely affects advertising. Now more people are home, so the digital advertising seems to have a lot greater edge on Facebook and stuff now. COVID's affected everything across the board. I mean, I really hope 6 months from now COVID's over. I hope this is a bad dream. But it's definitely affected. I'd say the biggest thing it affected is how we place tenants, our residents. We've increased all our standards to move someone in one of our places, because at the beginning of COVID, a lot of folks just stopped paying and said, well, I don't have to pay. The governor said so. The government said so. So I'd say we've raised our standard on rentals. We have a lot more Zoom meetings and a lot less face-to-face contact, but we're still buying and selling real estate. We're still wholesaling, and it's actually it's probably going to lower our marketing cost, because we've started some Facebook campaigns, and we're getting good leads from digital marketing that's even less. So anything that happens, no matter who's president, you can still make money.
Right.
The focus is to make money and to change with it. I like to think about it over the years, through all the hurdles I faced, I've stayed in business by changing with the times.
Right.
And by moving forward with the times. So always be willing to adapt.
Absolutely. Gregory Ballard wants to know, if you were starting from zero, how would you get your first commercial deal?
If you're starting from zero, I would recommend wholesaling your first commercial deal.
Yeah.
When you're doing something like that, and you're doing, you got to make sure, if you have a private investor and you're buying, say, a $200,000 commercial property for $100, and you're pulling out $50,000 and it needs $20,000, you have enough money. You got to remember, when you're doing these type of deals, you're going to put some money into them. If this is your first deal and you have no money, I would recommend wholesaling a commercial deal. And it's funny you said that. There's a young lady in California that called me up and had her first commercial deal, and she was debating wholesaling it or buying it and holding it as a rental. I said, look, this looks like it's going to make $4,000 a month, but what if it doesn't for 3 months? You should buy it and sell it and or wholesale it. And actually, it's what she did. I think she lined up some hard money. She's buying it and selling it and making, I think, like $75,000. So I would say, if you want to do your first commercial deal, put it under contract and sell it to someone else. How do you find someone else? Look at everybody else that owns commercial property in an area. Look at what they paid for it and give them a call.
There you go. Ali wants to know, most successful entrepreneurs have a daily routine. What is yours?
My daily routine is to generally get up around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. On weeks I don't have my son, I tend to work a little bit late. But I try to stay balanced. I try to stay healthy. Recently, about a year and a half or a year ago, I'd actually let myself get up to 215 pounds, and now I'm down to like 165, 170. And I stay pretty balanced with working out 3 times a week, trying to read something every day other than real estate and other than business. Even though I'd rather be reading real estate and business.
Yeah.
And really just trying to make sure I spend time with my family, call my parents. Every night I call family members, see how they're doing now.
That's awesome.
I'd like to get it to where I can. Well, we are getting it to where I don't have to work, more than 15 hours a week. But I'm going to do it because I love it. So I'd say, stay balanced, eat right, and make sure that you're reading, you're spending time talking to family, because ultimately that's what matters in the end. I know I love real estate. I know I love building. I know, one day I'd like to do some archaeology, dig up cities that are 300 feet under the ground, everything else. But, your family, especially your older relatives, are only going to be there so long. Think about what's important today, and that definitely helps you stay balanced in life. What's important for the future by looking at today.
Yep. Yui wants to know, which VA service was it that you recommended again?
Rocket Station, Robert Nickel. If you want, message me on Instagram at Mike, the number 2, the THE Fitz, FITZ, and I'll be tagged on the podcast after this, and I'll connect you with him directly.
Cool.
And also for real estate software, I use InvestorFuse, and they've really honed in their new software, and that's going really well as well.
So one thing that Yui was saying, sometimes he gets discouraged because he doesn't have consistent deal flow. How do you stay focused and train your mind?
So I got really discouraged in my first year. I was like, why does it take me 2 or 3 months for every deal I find? Then my next year, why does it take me a month and a half, 3 weeks for every deal I find? It gets easier and easier. What you do is you keep looking, you take more action to find deals, and then one day you're going to say, hey, I can just work one day and have a deal a month.
Yeah. Awesome. Very cool. All right, so we'll wrap up here. Guys, if this was helpful, please like it, share, comment. It helps the algorithms.
Let me say this too.
Yeah.
Steve really has his heart in this, and he really wants to help you guys. He wants to show you guys how you can not only better yourselves today, but you can have the dreams you want for tomorrow. I get invited on multiple podcasts. I flew out and I did this one because of who Steve is and where his heart's at. So I'd encourage you to listen, like, and subscribe to his podcast.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And then, guys, tune in next week. We got Tiffany High coming out from Ohio. She's going to talk about how she scaled to $200K a month by focusing on KPIs, which I know is one of those things that no one likes to look at. Last thoughts.
When you grow in real estate, you will learn to love KPIs because they save you a lot of money.
A lot of money.
Yes.
So what are some last thoughts you'd like to leave the listeners with?
So last thoughts, take massive action. Kong likes to say this, and I told him this years ago, action plus action equals massive actions, then results are inevitable.
Yeah.
If you dream it, you can do it. The world you dream of tomorrow depends on what you do today, and if you take action, you're going to have it.
I love it. That's it. If we had a mic that we could drop, we would drop it.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Gotcha.
Okay. So Mike to the Fitz, MIKE, the number 2, THEFITZ on Instagram, guys. All right. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you. Appreciate you coming up, man. This is awesome.
Thank you.